Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to talk about how to deal with a tenant who's not paying his rent on time in Dubai, or trying to get rid of a tenant who's maybe doing something else, illegal activities, subleasing your apartment, running maybe something that shouldn't be run from your apartment, so on and so forth, okay? Now, give you a little bit of a primer in Dubai in general. If you're new to the Dubai property real estate market, it's fairly easy, not that difficult if you play by the book and follow the steps that I'm generally going to describe in this video. Now, your case might be slightly different. So if it is, reach out to me. I'll put you in touch with the relevant people who can deal with tenant issues through the court system as well. But this video should give you a good guiding idea on how to deal with a tenant who's not paying his money on time, or any other problems that you might have the tenant and now you need him to get out of your property. First things first. Number one, before your tenant moves into your property, you must do your due diligence. A lot of times landlords aren't based in Dubai, or they're oblivious to the fact that a good tenant means payment on time and less problems. Now, some of the countries around the world, it's very easy to do your due diligence because you can run a credit check, you can get letters of references. For some reason in Dubai, that's really not taken hold. Like, you can't apply to the local credit bureau and ask them for a credit check on a particular person. If you're a bank, yes. If you're an individual, you can't get that, right? You can't ask for a tenant for his previous owners or landlords' letters of references. Just doesn't happen. You can't ask for a tenant to give you and show you his salary slip, okay? Something that doesn't happen. A few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, some companies tried to do that, but they failed miserably. Tenants in Dubai just weren't having it. They're not used to it. So what you have to rely on is an experienced agent or yourself to filter and do the necessary due diligence that's important to understand the background of the tenant, the kind of job that he has, where has he been living before. Now, I personally don't believe in discrimination. A lot of landlords do that. I don't advise that because you can have a perfectly good, healthy tenant who's going to pay you always on time from a specific country. So I personally always recommend that you should meet the tenant and understand a little bit about the background to start off the relationship on the right footing. Yeah, that's number one. Number two, understand that with your tenant is your client, your customer, your property. Call it like your business. It's an amazing business because even when your tenant's sleeping, they're still paying you rent. Even when they go on vacation, they're still paying you rent. What other business does that, right? It's very important for you to treat that business sacredly and that tenant as a paying customer on a day in, day out basis. So you have to maintain a good relationship with your tenant. Either you do that or the property management company that's running that property for you should be doing that in a professional way. Now, I'm not saying you need to become best friends with your tenant because then it becomes very difficult when the tenants aren't paying, but you have to have a cordial, friendly, professional relationship. That's very, very important. Now, how do you maintain that relationship in a professional way? Either you or your property management company should make it a habit to visit the property once in every 3 months. Now, if that's very difficult, once every 6 months at least, yeah? Even if that's difficult, at least make the visit once every year. But you should never, ever announce your visit to the tenant and say, hey, I'm going to be coming by to inspect the property. Guess what? Tenant's not going to feel very comfortable about that. You just say, hey, me or my representative is going to be visiting you to ask you if there's anything more that we can do to make your stay with us in our property as good as possibly we can, right? So addressing maintenance issues, any other problems that they might be having, it's your role as the landlord to address those in a timely way. And the only way you can do it, if you visit the property once a quarter, once every 6 months, at least once a year, please. It's very important. Now let's come back down to how to get a tenant out. Look, now when you visit the property, it's very easy for you or your property manager to understand if the tenant is keeping the property good, in good state, if the damage that he's incurred on the property is more than the deposit that you're holding, or if there's any other kind of illegal activity or subleasing when you've not actually allowed it happening. Subleasing is basically a tenant taking over a property and then subleasing it to his friend, relative, etc., and then making money off you when they did not have the original permission. But if you make those visits, you're going to be able to get them out because of breach of contract. That's one thing. The other thing is, what if your tenant doesn't pay you on time? In Dubai, it's very general that the tenant will either rent a property in one check all the way up to 12 checks. They give you this in advance and you will deposit the check in your bank on the day it's due. Trust me, the amount of landlords and agents who are not professional property managers that I've run into who do not deposit the check on the day that it's due. Do you know when you don't deposit the check on the day that it's due, what you're saying and the message you're giving to your tenant? That money is not important to be coming to you on time. Therefore, if the next few checks they're late, it's perfectly okay. And I've seen a problem with the tenant where the previous check was deposited by the landlord's representative about a month later because they just forgot about it. And then the next check was deposited on the day. Oh my God, the check bounced and the tenant said, the tenant turned around to the landlord and said, you did it deliberately. The first check you deposited 1 month late and this one you deposited on the day so it would bounce. Which is why I always suggest that you should put it on the day. Now, generally speaking, if you have a check in Dubai, the central bank gives you 6 months to deposit it. So if you've forgotten to deposit it, that's fine. You've got 6 months and it's still valid from the day or the date it was meant to be issued to, right? However, don't do that because your tenant gets the wrong message, right? And then it just becomes a dispute. So put the deposit checks, the rental checks on time. But now, what if a check does bounce, right? If it bounces, I always suggest that there should be a penalty on the tenant for the administrative paperwork, your time or your property manager's time that's going to go in going to the bank and recollecting the check or representing the check or waiting for the tenant to bring the cash to you, or then you going to the tenant and taking cash and giving them the new check. The penalty is a very good, how can I say that? It's a warning to the tenant that if you bounce your check, you're going to be paying 500 to 1,000 dirhams extra. And it's a very good way of making sure that the tenant, for lack of a better word, behaves and make sure that the rent is there on time. Now, here's the thing. A tenant sometimes can have a genuine reason to delay a check. What I suggest that all landlords should do and make it a policy is maybe give them the ability to, for the full amount of time that they're living with you, to once, only once, if they have lived with you 5 years, to give them that one facility to let you know in advance to delay the check by a maximum week. That's about it, okay? No more than that. But they gotta let you know at least a month in advance. If not, then you're gonna deposit the check on time. But let's say now a check has bounced and your tenant's not paying. How do you get him out? The first thing that you do is you communicate everything by email and get his response immediately. Hey, listen, Mr. So-and-so, your check has bounced. Here's a copy of the check. I need the cash plus the penalty deposited to my account, or come to my office, come to my home, whatever the way is. Now the tenant replies to you and he says, sure, the money is coming to you tomorrow. Maybe the money doesn't come up to you tomorrow, but at least you have a record of what is the conversation that's going on between you and the tenant. If the tenant doesn't pay now, let's say a week passes, your role now goes to taking this formally forward. You go to the notary public and send a public notary notice to the tenant from the court so that there is a specific date marked and the tenant has 30 days to remedy this, which means pay you, right? Easy peasy. But it's very important that the notice goes through the public courts so that you've got record on the day it was sent. If the tenant does not now pay up, very easy. You approach the rental committee in Dubai. They're pretty fast. They're also online now. You will probably get a settlement within 3 months, and you can have your tenant either he'll stop paying you with the penalty or he will be out of your property now. It's very important to start the proceedings ASAP so that the tenant understands you're serious, because lack of proceedings means that this tenant can essentially prolong his stay for free from 3 months to 6 months up to a year. So lack of knowing the law doesn't excuse you from harming your own financial interest. I've seen this happen a lot of times. But if you take the matter into your hands and follow the procedure I've just described, what's going to happen in the court is most likely you'll file a case. It's very easy to do in Dubai. There'll be one hearing. The tenant will be invited to present his side of the story. Maybe the tenant has some outstanding maintenance dues from you. Maybe he's got other issues that were not addressed. He's going to present his case. Most of the tenants who are not paying never show up. The judge will probably in the next hearing give a settlement. He'll send a court-appointed policeman or somebody to go and vacate the apartment, right? So this happens within 3 months. And trust me, this is much better than what I've heard about. For instance, one of my potential clients told me that in California, it was so difficult for him to get his tenant out. Yeah, this guy was an Emirates airline pilot. He had to take time off from Dubai and fly all the way to California, because even the lawyer that he had appointed said, listen, if you're not present in person over here, the tenant can just say, hey, the landlord asked me, verbally committed that I don't need to pay, and then it's just going to, our case is just going to go down the road. And what ended up happening was the lawyer, this is the tenant, the client narrating the story to me, the lawyer had like lots of cases that he was dealing with on that day. And he stood out there with all the dockets or the files, and he said, who are the landlords here who are willing to settle? They don't want a penalty. They don't want their back rent. They just want their tenant out. And obviously, my client being an Emirates Airlines pilot, didn't have the time to spend in California long times. He just said, you know what, I'm willing to settle. Basically, the deal that was made was tenant gets out without paying anything and you get your property back. Whereas that's not the case in Dubai. If you win your case, the tenant still owes you that money and he will get stopped at the airport if he's passing through, right? He might even get arrested and his case will continue until he pays you, right? And I've seen that happen in Dubai. There was one person, I didn't deal with this myself, but the person who was managing this property, he told me that this gentleman was in a very good position in a very big company, and there was 80,000 outstanding. For whatever reason, the tenant became extremely arrogant, things degenerated, communication broke down, there was a large sum of money that was owed to the landlord and he didn't want to pay. He was stopped at the airport, and the airport called the friend of mine who was managing the property, and they said, look, he's willing to pay you the outstanding right now. Would you please allow him to travel? And then they kind of settled that up, right? I've got other stories from London, but Dubai, I find that the court system's pretty fast, pretty straightforward. It goes down to the brass tacks pretty fast. It gives you a ruling and a judgment. You get your tenant out, you get your property back, happy renting, happy cash and income coming back to you. Hit the subscribe button, press the bell icon, you get updates from my videos. I love it. I love talking to you. If you've got questions, put them down below. I might make a video if it's required, or I can always answer. If you need to reach me, WhatsApp me. Email is going to get a delayed response. Talk to you soon.